Welcome to the conversation on the TYT network. We have an awesome guest for you now. Cori Bush, soon to be Congresswoman from St. Louis, first ever Justice Democrat. And I've got a lot more accolades where that came from, which I'm going to may embarrass you with in a second, Cori. But welcome back to the Young Turks.
Thank you. Thanks for having me back.
No problem. So Cori was the first Justice Democrat ever. She's the first candidate that I ever spoke to in the context of helping candidates. And what you guys might remember that from the reports we did about it and the interviews, et cetera. But what you don't know about Cori is how awesome she is behind the scenes. When the chips were down and there was no one else around to help, whether it was the first time that I had an issue with Just Democrats or it was in my congressional campaign, the person who always stepped up to help was Cori. So I couldn't be happier to have Cori as a friend and now as a person going into Congress. Cori, you're the best of us. I just wanted to make that clear before we even go forward. I wanted the audience to know how great you are behind the scenes as well as in front of the scenes. And I don't hide my perspective at all, as everybody knows. So now, having said that, let's talk about how you won. Because you did not win the first time around. When you and I talked the first time, we were hopeful. I don't know. In fact, let me start with that. Cori, do you remember me trying to talk you into running against Claire McCaskill instead? Because I thought you had a better chance of winning the Senate seat.
I do. I remember. Yes, I was like, what? I just kept thinking about, I had just run, my first run was U.S. Senate, and I was like, how much I had to travel and the money. I was like, no, I can't do this. Oh, gosh.
And
the horror.
Yeah. Well, so look, I think that says some things about the current state of affairs. I had obviously a lot of faith in you, so I thought you could go even bigger than Congress. I still think that. But the problem was that you were working as a nurse and you couldn't go around the state. Yeah. And in fact, it was, I don't know how in the world you ran twice for Congress. It was a minor miracle what you pulled off in more ways than people realize. But sticking with the beginning for a second. So you had run for Senate in 2016 and lost in the primary. Yes. And then what happened with brand new Congress and Justice Democrats in 2018?
Yeah, so brand new Congress reached out to me in 2016. And they came, I had an office, my office was in Ferguson. They came out to my office and said, hey, we just, we're talking about putting together this group to help, regular people run for office, especially, people of color and women of color, to help level the playing field. And we just want to know if you would be willing to be a part of it, And I said, well, you know what, if I ever decide to run for Congress, if I run again, then, I'll consider it. And so 6 months later, they reached back out but they were already, connected with you all, with Justice Democrats. And it was just like, okay, now I have a way that I can run, because I remember running before. I didn't have help, I didn't know how to fundraise. I didn't know how to get around the state. I was working a full-time job, getting off work and changing clothes in the parking lot and hopping on the road, for hours and, still taking care of kids. So it was so rough. But this was a vehicle for me to be able to run and have help in areas that I didn't even understand. Like I didn't even know what I needed. But Justice Democrats and brand new Congress came in and helped, to provide that.
Yeah, and so for folks who don't remember, brand new Congress was trying to get 435 people, new people elected to Congress. A wonderful ambition, but they were all trying to help on the Republican primary side with progressives too. And I thought it's a wonderful mission, but really, really hard. Whereas Justice Democrats was focusing just on the Democratic side. And so those are very related groups, a lot of the same personnel. Now, and then for Justice Democrats, so Cori was the first candidate. And so let's talk about
brand new Congress too.
And for brand new Congress too, that's right. And so so they come in with a little bit of infrastructure, and again for the audience, the guys, this is the why every dollar you guys donate to Cori or to Justice Democrats makes such a big difference, because it begins to help set up an infrastructure that candidates need. It also begins to set up a brand name that progressive candidates in particular need. Otherwise, they're just random people in a sea of candidates, whereas Cori was part of this team in a sense. And so now let's talk about 2020, where you did win, Cori. What do you think were the biggest differences between 2018 and 2020 that got you over the top?
So, first of all, I have to start it with the fact that you gave me a platform. And so I got to make sure that that is made clear. So people from my district heard about Justice Democrat. I didn't even know about it. People from this district heard about Justice Democrats by watching your show and nominated me to JD. So I remember that's how my community started talking about it. And then, so I wouldn't even be in this position, had it not been for you all taking a chance on someone, like you said, out of this sea of people running for Congress. So thank you. But in 2018, we did the best that we did what we could. It was just a lot happening. I had a car accident, close to the end of my race. And that took me off of the campaign trail. And while I was still working a full-time job for before I was hit. And so it was just so much happening. It was really hard. But when AOC won, when Alex won, so much changed for my race. But then even after that, the film came out, Knock Down the House. It helped with visibility for me. It helped with name recognition. It also humanized me. So there were some people even in my district that felt like, oh, well, we know who Cori is, but she's that protester. She's that Ferguson activist. She's that one that shuts down highways and, that kind of thing. But they didn't see the other side. And so the film helped to show that, there is another side to me and other candidates like me running for these seats. And when the film did well, even better and better, it really helped us. But then Senator Sanders, when he asked me and the other people with from the film to be national surrogates, that helped with name visibility, even more. And people started donating. When people started donating, I was able to add more staff, and that just helped out. And it helped to change our race. But let me say, COVID-19, when that hit in our country, people started paying attention to nurses. I'm a registered nurse. I work in community health. People started saying, nurses, maybe we should be listening to nurses. Maybe we should be listening to people who've been talking about Medicare for all for years because they don't want their patients to die, and then when I ended up with my COVID-19 situation, people just, they were like, okay, this is a nurse who put herself out there. And so people just wanted to help. And so that helped us along. And then with the George Floyd and Breonna Taylor protests, I continue to do what I always do. When Black lives are under attack, what do? We stand up and we fight back. And so people saw this person consistently fighting in the community, trying to save lives, and they want that champion in Congress.
So I want to get back to that timeline in a second, but as an aside here, I'm curious. So you're one of the leaders of the Ferguson protests. We talked about it a lot on the show, and then St. Louis, et cetera. So it's such a layup for politicians to be out there that, like, I'm not even sure that I want them out there unless they're politicians now like you who actually care and proved it, and that's why people rallied behind you in the first place. But why do you think the old school politicians, including the one you beat, why don't they even show up? Like, what's gone wrong that they're not even bothering to pretend to care?
I really don't know. But I guess in some ways it is, kind of just being so far removed from it. And just feeling like, for some, probably maybe feeling like we've done that already, and now we've moved into this other area, and so now this is how I work, this is my work now, and I could see a little bit of that because I remember after Ferguson and we had to, we started protesting again after the Jason Stockley verdict. We wanted justice for Anthony Lamar Smith in St. Louis in 2017, just feeling like, oh, here we go again. And then when the George Floyd and Breonna Taylor protest started, it was like the trauma. And it was like, oh, my goodness, I really don't want to go and do this again. But because our heart is in it to save lives, we went back. Now, I don't really understand that disconnect with people who could be out, especially because we're talking about people who represent those areas. Like, for me, if my people are out there, I need to be out there. I'm that type of, whether it's nursing or activism or whatever it is, but everybody doesn't have that heart, so I think it's part of the mission of the person, too.
Yeah, it's probably best symbolized by Elliot Engel's hot mic moment where he said, if it wasn't for the primary, I wouldn't even be here. So now that's a slightly different situation, but Lacey Clay and others were also not there. So I'm not sure how different it is. But
have had opportunities. It's not that the opportunities weren't there. They could have course corrected after Ferguson. He could course corrected. He could have done something different after with the Jason Stockley verdict. Could have done something different with George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. People would have welcomed it. They would have been like, what? At first, but then it would have been like, okay, good. Well, now things are changing. We can't do the same thing and then expect a different result. We have to start pay attention to what your constituents are saying. The people that have to vote for you, what do they need? That's what we have to do.
So, Cori, I think that the disconnect eventually comes in from when you get to D.C. And people start telling you, look, you have to be above things now, right? And you start to lose track of being a representative, representing the people that are in your district, and there's this feeling that the Congress people in D.C. are royalty. And so it almost feels like getting your hands dirty if you're going to a protest, et cetera. That's the cultural sense that I get from DC. And the only good news about that is that that's what's helping for them to lose, because they've completely and utterly lost touch with actual human beings. But Cori, now that you won the primary and are very likely to win the general election, obviously in this district, have you started to get a sense of that at all? Are people telling you, and I don't know, so that's why I'm genuinely asking, are people starting to tell you, look, hey, Cori, you got to start acting differently now that you're going to be a congressperson?
People started telling me that in 2017. Well, it's really 2018. Well, 2017. You can't do this. You can't do that. You can't be this activist. You can't be in the street. You can't wear this. You can't. People, and so I haven't heard it as much since I won. I think because I stayed true to that. I ran with these braids. They said that they were unprofessional, but I ran with my braids. Most of the time, people said that my hips were too big to wear certain outfits, but I wore them anyway. People said my skin was too dark. You need to do this and wear this type of makeup and all of that. I did it anyway. People, so people have been saying it for a long time. Oh, and do I speak in African American vernacular English? I do, and that's how you're going to get me. So all of people have been saying it, but since I stayed true to myself. So I'm in here. I'm here with a T-shirt on. I've stayed true to me, and so I haven't heard that. I have received calls, from Congress members. None of them have said, "Well, you know what, you're going to have to do this." People have stopped telling. They stopped saying, "Okay, Cori, you can't." It stopped. And I have been clear about, I'm going to Congress, and if something is happening in my community, I'm going to, and I can't fix it on my end, I will be back in the streets protesting as I'll be the Congresswoman protester. So that's why I call myself the politivist, because I'm staying that way. Fix the problems. People, it's always like, we want to come at you about how you're working on the problem. Well, if you've been in a position to fix the problem and you didn't, don't come at me about how I'm fixing it, because you had the opportunity to do so and you didn't.
I'm already seeing the T-shirt now. Don't come at Cori.
Thou shalt not try. Yeah.
I love that the message was clear enough already that people are like, don't try Cori. Don't. She's not gonna bend. She's not gonna go for it. So look, but they'll be back. They will. And so, Cori, one of the things that they're going to use, and I'm curious what you think about it now. And look, there's I hate the argument, and I'm clear about it, but I get that this folks think there's legitimacy to it, which is that they say, hey, look, when you get into Congress, when you were running and you didn't have attachment to any party or anything else, you could do whatever you want, right? But now when you act in a certain way, it puts your colleagues in a difficult position. And look, these are good people. You've met them, you've had a beer with them, and don't put them in that difficult position by being so aggressive in X, Y, or Z. How do you handle that balancing act?
The issue is I'm not so far removed from pain. So I'm going to be someone that has had a lot of pain getting closer to power. And so that's what I'm going to remember. Like I said, I've grown up seeing what politics can do, what power can do to people. I've seen the hurt my father went through after being in politics for more than 30 years. So I've seen the tricks. I saw the tricks that happened during Ferguson. I saw when they threw money at people. I wasn't one of those people who accepted anything. And so, I'm not worried about that at all, because I can skin and grin with you, but I will remember every single time my face hit the ground, out there on the streets of Ferguson. I will remember every time I had a utility shut off and nobody cared, that when I was in the payday loan cycle and I couldn't get out of it. Every time I slept out in my car with my 2 babies, I remember that. Like I remember these things. I remember being evicted and having to move and not having the money to move and putting my stuff in trash bags like that to be able to at least get out of the house. I remember not having a place to put my children when I would have to work late and I didn't have anybody to keep them because my parents were also at work. So these things I remember. I remember, trying to go to court to get justice during my sexual assault case and not ever getting justice even to this day. So those things I won't forget. And you can skin and grin in my face and we can shake hands, or we can bump for COVID. But what we won't do is you won't use that skinning and grinning to stop me from bringing home deliverables to my community, because I know what it's like. I'm not far removed from it. And I will continue to think about that because that's the only reason I want to go.
So now you know why we've always loved Cori. And that's such a great way of putting it, unfortunately, which is you're not that far removed from the pain. And so I don't know if it's a hashtag I remember or hashtag remember the pain, but that's exactly right, because it's not about holding on to that. It's about remembering that people are going through that right now, right? The people you're representing, they've got their face in the pavement. They've got problems with their paying the rent, etc. And so I love that you remember that, and that's what drives you. So speaking of which, they did a couple of what were characterized accurately as vicious attacks against you during the campaign. But if you remember, I was amused by them because I think that they were accidentally helping you, and I told you that. So one was your opponent said, here I'll do the 2 here. So one was they said you might be supporting BDS on Israel. I don't know which consultant thought that was a winning strategy in St. Louis to talk about how you're not pro-Israel enough or pro-right-wing government of Israel enough. And then but even dumber was the evictions, when they talked about how you had been evicted several times. What do you think happened there? Did Lacy Clay lose so much touch with his constituents and didn't realize that makes people root for you? Rather than look down their nose at you? Or was it some white consultant? What in the world happened there, and how much do you think that it actually helped rather than hurt you?
I think it was a little bit of both. I think it was some consultant that was out of touch. He wasn't really paying attention, or he was, and probably that he felt like, okay, let's use what we can, but because he's disconnected, because he's out of touch, he thought that was the way. But what he didn't understand was that there was a coalition of people that was built out there on the streets of Ferguson that have continued to stay together and organize together, not just for Black lies, even though that is the core of what we do. But we've branched off and we organize in other areas. So we're organizing for women. We're organizing, for Palestinian rights. We're organizing for LGBT rights. We're organizing for, there's a search and rescue team because we have so many missing girls and missing children. We're just so much organizing for our unhoused population. So what he missed, organizing for our Latinx community, he missed that. And so all those people coming together, even our Jewish community, so many people coming together, just saying that human lives, deserve dignity, that people deserve quality of life. That's what he ended up fighting against. And so with that, you can't slam the poor people in our community. You can't slam our disabled people, our working class people, and think that that's going to push you over. It may have worked back in the day, but right now, when people are facing evictions, people are continuing to be laid off or furloughed right now in his community, the community that he did not stand up for when COVID-19 hit. Because when I think about what our congressperson could have done when the PPP loans, when that whole thing hit, our congressperson could have said, you know what, all of you small businesses, I know that you don't have access to these banks. I know you don't have that. So I tell you what, meet me at such and such community center. I got these banks together and they're going to help you with these loans and we're going to try to get that for you first. He could have done that. He could have said, this is how, he could have done so many things, but he didn't show up for us, in the same way that he has. And so he missed the mark. And all that did was it helped people to see, we need an active leader that's been through what we've gone through that can help us to get to a different place.
So, Cori, they haven't voted on Medicare for all at all. And, you talked about in the campaign about how, if anything proves we need Medicare for all, it's this pandemic. And so when you get to Congress, Joe Biden says he doesn't want Medicare for all. Democratic leadership says they don't want Medicare for all. So they will tell you, you're not going to get a vote. How would you react to that?
So one thing that I'm doing is I have been and I will continue to be actively helping other candidates like me to get to Congress. So it may not happen the way that it is right now, but the more of us that get in, the more of our districts that we can affect, the more people that are then pushing on other legislators and members of Congress to then, because that's what I've seen. I've seen activists put pressure to make others change. And so hopefully at some point we will get to that place. So then Joe Biden may say, you know what, I see the pressure. I see what the community is saying. And then maybe his mind will change with that. I've seen people change. In 2014, we were saying Black Lives Matter and people called us terrorists. That was the big thing. We were terrorists. We were all of these horrible things. 2017, they called us black extremity, whatever, black extremists or whatever it was called. The now in 2020 now is like, oh, everybody's saying Black Lives Matter. They're putting it on their buildings. They're, everywhere. Well, when you stay diligent and you keep pushing that thing, things change. So that's what we'll continue to do. So I'll apply pressure where I am seated in Congress, but then I'll also be looking to other people to come and join and expand the squad.
There we go. Here we go. Squad 2.0. Cori Bush, Jamal Bowman. And others, and Marie Newman, et cetera. So, and more to come. So, Cori, there's so much more I want to talk to you about. We'll do it again and again, I hope. Future Congresswoman for Missouri's 1st District, Cori Bush, thank you for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for having me again.
Oh, absolutely.
Thanks for watching this free clip of the Young Turks. Don't forget to become a TYT member today. For more exclusive content, join now at tyt.com/join.